Impact Teams Radio. Welcome to Impact Teams Radio, the show where we explore what it takes to be a leader of the leaders in corporate America. Get ready to be inspired and discover proven tips for going from average to exceptional. Now, here's your host and guide, Tony Sherman.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Impact Teams Radio. I'm your host and guide, Tony Sherman, and with me today is Glenn Leibowitz. Hello, Glenn.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Very fine. Thanks very much for being on the show. I really appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, hey, thanks for inviting me on the show.
So, Glenn, let me just introduce you to our audience, and then I'm going to step back and ask you to talk about yourself for a couple of minutes, introduce who you are, and what I wouldn't mind doing when we start getting going. I found Glenn, guys, through his LinkedIn. You guys know that I find most of my guests through LinkedIn blog posts, and I was going through looking at good leadership blog posts, and what I found was a great one that Glenn wrote called, "Are You Letting Your People Shine?" And Glenn, I thought that would have made a huge impact on me as well if I was that young age and that happened to me. I'd be very nervous, but I wouldn't mind opening with you explaining that story from your perspective.
Yeah, sure, Tony. This was in the mid-'90s, and I was working for an advertising agency, and we were preparing for the pitch, a really big client pitch. The client was putting our account under review. I was working for an ad agency. They were looking at other agencies, and I was working really hard with my manager and the entire creative team to put together a pitch to try to save the client. And I was in Hong Kong working with the entire team for a couple of days. I worked on the presentation, on the pitch, and my manager was supposed to get up and present it. But at the last minute, he looked at me and said, "You know what, Glenn, you've been working hard on this one. You know this material better than any of us in the room. Why don't you present it?" He didn't give me a lot of lead time, a lot of time to prepare, but I was familiar with the material. I stood up and I delivered the presentation in front of the senior management of the client, as well as our senior management, and we ended up retaining the client.
Well done. I mean, that must have felt great for you. You must have been so nervous in that space between doing the presentation and then getting the result and finding that you actually kept the account. How long was that gap between you doing the presentation and then you finding out that you kept the account?
Yeah, I think it was probably at least a few days, maybe a week.
Oh, I'd have been so scared. That would have been a very high-pressure week for me. If I'd have been put on the spot and told. So how did you feel?
Yeah, I had some experience delivering presenting in public. I was on the debate team in high school. I had done a lot of presentations also to our clients at that point, but this was sort of the big pitch. So I really didn't expect to be put on the spot in front of the client for that very important situation. But I was fairly relaxed because I was familiar with the material, and it went very well. And then when we found out that we retained the client, of course, we were all very happy.
So some of the lessons that you pulled out of that was you said, give credit where credit is due, praise them publicly. But the one that I really liked was praise them privately. I think that that's a very powerful insight because I know I enjoy public praise when I do well and my bosses say, "Hey, Tony did this." But I treasure far more when they walk up and say to me, "Well done." So I thought that was a great insight. Exactly,
Tony. I have to say, that moment, that experience was really sort of transformative. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget the opportunity that my managers gave me to get up and present. But I think what was really important was also that they appreciated what I had done. They thanked me publicly and privately, and in fact, they were trying to, they were opening the door for a promotion at that point. I was actually planning on heading back to the U.S. to go to business school, which is what I did. But that experience really opened some doors for me. The other thing is that I learned a lot from that experience that I think I've been able to apply to my work, now that I'm in a managerial position.
And what sort of things did you lead that shapes your leadership style now? Sorry, what did you learn that shapes your leadership style now?
Right, I think it's the whole point of that that blog post that I wrote on LinkedIn, are you letting your people shine, is about giving credit where it's due. So if you want to motivate your people, you want to charge them up, and you want them to feel like they're on a mission. That the mission they're on is the same mission that you're on. They're headed towards the same goals that you're headed towards. You really need to appreciate them and show that. And it could be public, which is sometimes very, very necessary, and sometimes it could be very private, where you pull them aside and say, hey, you did a fantastic job, and here's why, and be specific about it. And that could be very motivating. At least it has been for me, I know, in the past.
Hold on a sec. Okay, so I take notes like crazy, Glenn, because I always see that when I'm working with a guest here and we're sharing stuff for people who want to be leaders of leaders, I'm also getting a mini masterclass. So if there's a quick pause between it, just know that I'm taking notes, and my audience are used to that by now. So,
sounds great.
Thank you. So, Glenn, that was one win. Can you think back over your career where you've had a similar win that's been as impactful and shaped your leadership style? Or, if you want to flip the coin, can you think of a loss that you may have had that has as much of a visceral impact on you and shaped your leadership style and what you learned from it?
I think if I were to look back over the past several years of managing and leading people, I think one thing that I feel really proud of is helping to develop people that work for me, to develop them to their fullest potential. And that this is something, obviously it's a medium to long-term thing. It's something that I see after working with someone over a period of several years, but I think that's been one of the most gratifying things for me is to help people to identify where their strengths lie and to build on those strengths, to identify any kind of development needs or weaknesses, if you will, and to try to correct those or to work on those and to build the skills that they need to sort of to overcome those development needs, and to see them progress over time, to develop and grow into the role, and also to take on newer and bigger roles and responsibilities. And then eventually, if they eventually do leave our firm, I actually get a sense of pride to see where they go. In some cases, they go to very senior positions and take on more responsibility, or they go off to another market, or maybe even switch industries. And I actually do get a sense of pride out of that.
Oh, yes, I can imagine so. So would you say in terms of your personality that you like the strategic approach and you're happy to do stuff that has a multi-year horizon rather than just the next quarter? Well, I certainly like to see immediate impact from some of the things that we do. Not everything is measured in terms of years. But yes, I think it's true. I do like to see people develop over a period of time. And like I said, it does take time to develop skills. It does take time to change habits, to learn new things, and also to see the impact of your work. And when I have the privilege of working with someone over a period of several years, I can see that. We can all see that, and also recognize that. So I guess it's a little bit of both. Okay, and that makes sense. So stepping back a bit, because you and I have a context that our listeners don't, we jumped straight into that first story because it was so powerful. But let me just put a context around the comments and why I'm asking these questions to Glenn. It's because Glenn is the lead on McKinsey's External Communication and Publishing and Digital Marketing in Greater China. So, Glenn, one of the reasons I asked you that was obviously my perception of what I hear about China and what I read on international papers and so forth is that China has culturally typically a more strategic horizon than, say, the average American business. And so I was wondering if you enjoyed working in that space because you're working with people who have a strategic mindset, or does that play into it at all for you? Yes, I think it does. Look, China is very proud of its 5,000 years of history. And
you could laugh at that and think that that's something. It's just something that maybe historians or academics are interested in. But the reality is, they actually do put things into a longer historical context. So they do. I wouldn't generalize, but some people out here in China do like to sort of look at the long term, and they can see put things into a longer term perspective. For me, I think I've been working out here my entire career. I've only worked in Greater China, and that includes Taiwan and mainland China. And I've been out here for a good 23, 24 years. I started studying Chinese about 27 years ago. So I've seen a lot of changes over that period of time, changes to the economy, some political changes along the way, and, of course, the enormous business opportunities that have been created over the past couple of decades with the opening of China and the amazing growth that we've seen in the region. So it is. I'm here for the long term, and I think I think that's really the best way to view things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It must be fascinating because you've almost put in a quarter of a century. So. And it's been a fairly compressed quarter of a century from a Chinese perspective, just in terms of all the changes. And I'm personally thinking about Hong Kong. That was a huge China change, if you will, from a British perspective. And I've enjoyed watching the changes that have gone on in Hong Kong just in the brief time that China's had it. I mean, Hong Kong's radically changed from my perspective.
That's true. I think you could say that about a lot of the other major cities in the region. Taipei, where I'm based, Shanghai, Beijing, and then so many other cities in China. The pace of transformation has just been amazing. And
given that, obviously the power of networking and meeting people and building up your network. Are you a strategic networker? Because I must admit, I never was until a couple of years ago. A couple of people tried to mentor me into networking, and I was a meritocracy kind of person. Thought, well, it depends on what I know. It doesn't matter what who I know and all that kind of thing. But as I mature in age, I suddenly realized the power of a strategic network. It's not a manipulative thing. It's a resource issue. Are you careful with your networking? Do you take a long perspective on your networking, or are you more like the kind of person I was a couple of years ago, where networks don't really matter that much?
No, absolutely. That is, I'm definitely a strategic networker. I think building relationships is absolutely critical anywhere. But for some reason in China, in Greater China, in this region, there's a premium attached to relationships, the quality of the relationship, how long you've known someone, and sort of the quid pro quo, the sort of the give and take that's required over a long period of time to sort of build that relationship. And some of my best relationships are definitely the longest ones. I've known people, I've worked with people in some cases for decades, and these are people that I can call up or email and maybe ask for a favor, or if they call me, I'll answer the phone and or answer their email, and maybe there's an opportunity for both of us, or maybe just one of us. But these are people that I trust, or they trust me. We have a mutual trust that we built up over a long period of time, and that we can use to our mutual advantage.
And do you think that as America goes into international markets, that we need to be having that perspective as we start to expand out of being potentially national companies into international companies? We need to move beyond the quarterly reports as a perspective.
Sure. Look, I'm not going to comment on sort of the quarterly reporting system. I think there's a lot that's been said about that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right, exactly. But what I would say is that absolutely, I think, and I'm just going to refer to the region that I know best, which is Greater China, which includes China, Taipei, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. That taking the long-term perspective, building the relationships, building the trust is absolutely critical, I believe, to getting things done and to being successful here in the region. Like I just said a few minutes ago, the economy has been just growing like gangbusters. creating tremendous opportunity for companies and individuals here. But behind the numbers, behind the news headlines, is a whole bunch of people here on the ground, building the relationships day in, day out, and building the trust-based relationships that are needed to get things done, to do the business transactions that need to be done, to create the relationships that will open up new opportunities. So you really have to be here on the ground, building relationships day in, day out to really, to be successful here. And it's not going to be sort of flying in and flying out every so often, or maybe a couple of times a year. That works to a point, but it's really going to be sort of living here, working here on the ground consistently, and building up relationships, building your network over a long period of time.
And that makes a lot of sense. So my next question to that is, do you find, because obviously you're in a global company, when people come from, say, the US and they come out to China on assignment, do you find that they're open to being mentored into that longer-term relationship, or do they typically think, well, I'm only here for 6 months or 2 years, and they don't take the care to plant well and water relationships well? How do you find people when they've got a short-term assignment perspective?
But I think I've seen people here from my firm on short-term assignment, and I've seen them on medium or longer-term assignment. I think we educate them pretty well. Coming in, we give them a good debrief before they come to the region. So my colleagues, the people I work with, seem to do fairly well. They have the right attitude. I think what I have seen, however, outside of our firm at other companies that I've observed, or people I know working at other companies, is that there is a short-term mentality among some, where they know that they're just here for a couple of years and then that they're going to move on. And that is a reality on the ground. Companies rotate executives in and out of the region fairly regularly, and that's just the reality. They rotate them for many reasons, because they want to give them global exposure and send them off to other markets, and that's fine. But I believe it does, in a way, hinder their ability to build the long-term relationships that I was just talking about, and it sort of may hinder their ability to be successful on the ground. If they're only here for a couple of years, they know it, their companies know it, maybe their networks know it. I think some of them take advantage of it. They in a positive way. They're very positive about their experience. They're happy to be here, and they make the most of it. I see that in most cases, but in some cases they're just sort of, flying in and flying out over, maybe they're here for a couple of years or even a shorter period of time.
Yeah. But actually, the funny thing was, when you were saying that, I was thinking, as I've done this transformation in my own mind, I've gone back to people that I had a good relationship. I've re-strengthened those ties. And I find that a blended approach, which we can now do today, of almost the hierarchy of communication, the occasional email, the occasional phone call or video chat, then the occasional physical face-to-face. If you blend those, you can, these days, keep relationships warm and growing that you potentially couldn't have done 20 years ago, because the technology and the pervasiveness of it just wasn't there.
Absolutely. I can only agree with you on that, Tony. What I was just saying about building relationships, being on the ground over a period of time, was probably a little bit more true in the past. But now, with video conferencing, we've got a camera, we've got video conferencing on every laptop right in front of us. You and I are able to communicate across the world instantaneously, seamlessly, clearly, and we can also share this conversation with the entire world. I just marvel at the power of communication technology to allow us to do what we can do. So, we can all build relationships around the world, 24/7 pretty much, especially with LinkedIn and other platforms. And it just absolutely amazes me. And so the opportunities actually become, sort of that much greater for all of us.
They do. Hey, Glenn, I'm sorry, but I've just looked at the time and we've gone straight past the time marker. So I'd like to invite you back for another episode if that's okay, and we can talk maybe some more on communication skills and networking and that kind of stuff.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tony.
Okay. Thank you very much, Glenn, for being a fantastic guest. So, Impact Nation, you know what to do here. Take one of the nuggets, and there have been plenty in this show that you have got from what Glenn's been teaching us. Put it into your leadership toolkit, practice it for at least 6 months, and you'll be a better leader in 6 months' time than you are today. And until next week, this is Tony Sherman, your host and guide, wishing you a great week.
That's it for this week. Thank you for listening. Now go and apply these few gems. Make the wisdom you have heard your own. If you want to be part of our launch success, then please go to impactteamsradio.com/love and tell the world. If you want more and never want to miss a beat, please go to impactteamsradio.com/subscribe. If you have 3 minutes, we would love to see a positive review on iTunes. And until next time, remember to act on what you've learned, and you'll be ahead of most of the world. Impact Teams Radio.